because there are reasons not to use the item master. Maybe it just seems like it's too complicated. Maybe you think it's too many clicks to manage revisions. Maybe you don't need that BOM behavior in Vault at all. Or maybe you just think you've got too much data to try to make the transition. So I'd like to get a sense of, again, for those of you who haven't decided to go with items, why not? But it does seem a little bit complicated, right? It's a little bit difficult maybe to get your mind wrapped around at first and what items are, but I think once you understand them and how they work, it's really just a bit of additional, very useful behavior on top of what you're already doing in Vault today. So if you're already managing files and file life cycles in Vault and have a good grasp of that, managing items is, I think, just a very small additional step for a lot of additional value. But I mean, I do see the vast majority of you have considered it, and a big hurdle is that existing migration. So in those situations, if you're, especially after this presentation, if you've got renewed interest in switching to items, we should talk and see what we can do about that. I mean, that's one of the things we specialize in here at Hagerman is helping our customers achieve things that are otherwise pretty difficult to do. Right. So for those of you, especially that think they're still too complicated or too many extra clicks, right? Let's talk about that, right? So there's an extra record that you've got to maintain. Like why wouldn't we use items, right? If they do all these great things, why doesn't everybody use them, right? So they're extra clicks, and for years and years, I mean, I've been selling, and implementing Vault for literally 20 years at Hagerman, well before items were even existed in the concept of Vault, right? And they're extra clicks. If you don't need that other behavior, then it's extra clicks you just don't want to bother with. Some file types may still need to be maintained with file behaviors. Maybe some files don't make sense to have related to an item. So maybe some things are files and some things are items. You've got different workflows. You've got to update the item when your CAD file changes. The default jobs work only with file life cycles. And then depending on how the item master has been configured, the workflow might end up kind of confusing, right? But I think we can help with all of that, right? When it comes to the additional record, yes, it's an extra record, but there are lots of ways to represent a part number. There's lots of information associated with a part number. CAD files are only one representation of that part number. And that may be the only representation that people that use Vault care about. Maybe that's the only thing you need to worry about. In which case, maybe items, are too much work. But not all of the information about a part number is CAD-centric, right? And most Vaults that I've seen, there are often more than just the CAD file. When you've got a part number that you're managing information for, many Vaults have more than just the CAD file and more than just a single CAD file that describe a part number. So the item is a great way to be able to easily combine all of that disparate file-based information into one record for easy access, right? And there are benefits to having multiple records describing a part number. The CAD file can be owned by the CAD folks. The item record can be owned by, a project manager or process control or something, right? So the CAD file, you just check in, check out, do your work, maybe update the item. But then when it comes to transitioning the item or maintaining some properties on that item, maybe someone else does that, right? And maybe they're doing that by hand or in some other system right now where it doesn't make as much sense, right? And even though you've got multiple records, it's very straightforward to navigate back and forth between. So if you're looking at a file that you think represents a part number, and when you want to go to the part number, one click can get you over to the item record. 2 clicks can get you back to the file record from the item, right? And these days you can even see the item and BOM data in Vault while you're in CAD, which would include any items that had been added to Vault afterwards, right? So now that additional record being around, yes, it's a little more work and it's a little more complication, but there is, in my mind, tremendous value for that complication, right? The extra workflows for other file types, a lot of times those files behave differently anyway. You've got work instructions that maybe just have, whip and release versus the CAD file that maybe has more states, right? And when you're talking about the process of how do I take a record from work to released, the clicks for items are the same as the clicks for files, right? It's just a different icon, essentially, that you're looking at. Item updates, that's one of the biggest issues that I see that people come up with is, I hate having to update the item when the CAD file changes, right? You can update an item in literally 2 clicks. You can update the item from your CAD application, and that also then allows you to iterate on the CAD file and make changes to the CAD file before you update the item. So in that situation where others are looking at the item or maintaining the item, you can do your CAD work and iterate as much as you want, and then eventually update the item to push those changes to the part number record, right? So again, that concept of updating, there's value even in the quote unquote having to do it. I think there's value in not doing it right away sometimes, right? And a hurdle that a lot of people don't think about, this is newer behavior in Vault where you can automatically create PDF, DXF, and step files. Out of the box, like the default behavior in Vault, you can only queue up those jobs against files when you're using file life cycles. And so out of the box, that workflow can get a little bit complex, right? But you can design that workflow to minimize confusion, and some very common third-party software that we implement literally every day, Cool Orange Power Jobs, can remove that limitation entirely, in addition to giving you lots of other interesting behaviors, right? So beyond all of those common problems, right, there are other, and the reasons I think, yes, they are things to consider, but I think there are upsides or ways to overcome those limitations. The additional benefits, right? One of the biggest ones is getting your BOM data out of CAD, right? People can look at the BOM, they can review the BOM, they can add to the BOM without ever opening the CAD file, right? And you can unlock your model state data from CAD, right? We can capture both Inventor model state information and SOLIDWORKS configurations, basically one CAD file that contains information about many part numbers, right? The Vault file, interface doesn't have a great way to explore all that, but Vault lets you do it. So here's a typical example where we've got an assembly, right? This is our original assembly here, and we've got options for different paint colors, let's say. A great way to capture those variations or variants is using model states in Inventor, right? So our blue has a slightly different part number and a different description. Our green has a slightly different part number and different description, right? We can capture that data in CAD, but now how do we get that out of CAD into, 3 different part numbers that are almost identical, but maybe each have their own part number for the paint of that specific color and, different overall part number and different description, right? Well, in CAD, maybe you're exporting 3 different bills of material to Excel and then giving them the right name and then touching each spreadsheet to add the part number. But in Vault, what we can do is we can just assign item to that assembly, and it will automatically extract, just like that, the 3 distinct part numbers for the 3 distinct different colors. So our base, and then our blue variant and our green variant with the correct description. Now these are 3 different records in the system that can now each have their bill of materials modified to add the correct color of paint, but they are all still linked back to the CAD file, right? So this to me is one of the best uses of items in Vault, is being able to quickly build out your bills of material for variants that you have captured in a single document with model states. Right? Linking of files together, right? Things that I call alternate representations, right? So for hoses or tubes, let's say you've got a tube that you buy, it's got a part number, and you show that in 50 different possible configurations in your model. They all have the same part number. There are 50 different Inventor part files to describe the 50 different pieces of geometry. You've got 50 files floating around, but it's all the same part number. You can combine all of those files onto one record and link them all together with that part number, so that you could quickly see, for this part number, here are all of the representations of that, right? And then, of course, all the non-CAD data, work instructions, cut sheets, quality plans, right? Now, if you're managing all of this stuff with files, you put in a part number, and you can, up here at the top, and you're seeing all of these different things. It could be a step file, a PDF, even other model files that have no bearing on that. But if you put a part number in Vault, you see just the part numbers. And then underneath that, you can see all of the different related files, right? It's a nice, clean container, which is nice, but we're used to, engineers are used to using Vault. They're used to complexity. When you get into people that don't use Vault every day, let's say they use the thin client, that's what we see right up here. When they put in a part number and they're looking for files, they're going to get this huge list of things, and maybe they can puzzle it out. You're asking somebody to, look for that part number with PDF, and if you use CAD every day, it seems, oh, that's simple. You just do it. But there are people that don't sit in front of a computer all day, and that don't like computers at all. It can be challenging for them to sort through a list of things and find what they're after, right? So if you have an item-centric workflow, right, you can say, I want to search for items instead of files. And that same number, again, now you just have those 3 part numbers to pick from. And on that part number, now you have all of the relevant documents. So I know for that part number, this is exactly what it is I'm looking for, right? It's much easier for a lot of people that are not used to using, computers all day and big lists of files to get exactly what they need by just searching for a part number and getting that list of part numbers succinct. These are all of the part numbers. And if they type in the exact part number, they're only going to have one record, period. Right? And then finally, one of the biggest benefits in my mind, if you don't use something like model states and if you don't have a lot of files, is getting to a complete engineering bill of materials. Right? You can certainly do this in Inventor. By adding virtual components, right? You can add rows to a parts list on a drawing. You can export to a spreadsheet and type in and copy and paste and combine things, what have you, right? But Vault gives you much more capability to do this much faster. And you can combine the BOMs from different software more easily too, keeping all of the BOMs linked to each individual piece of software, AutoCAD Electrical, maybe a part model in SOLIDWORKS, an assembly in Inventor. You need all of that to come together in one bill of materials, consolidated from engineering. You can do that with Vault while keeping those independent BOMs linked to the different format CAD files, right? So let's take a look at a side-by-side comparison. On the left here, we have how you might do this in Inventor to get to a complete engineering bill of materials. The goal here is I want to add one part to the BOM that I don't have a drawing for, in this case, Loctite. On the right side is how I would do it in Vault. So let's take a look at how we do it in Vault, right? I start from my CAD file. I go to my item, right? There's my part number for this. I can edit that item by opening it up, pressing the edit button, right? Edit is kind of like checking out the item, right? There's its bill of materials. I can edit. I can add a row to the BOM, and all I have to do is search. I know I want to add Loctite. I don't know what the part number is. I know it's Loctite red. There it is. It's on my list. I add it, and then if I need to, I can change the quantity, and I'm done, right? 40 seconds or so, and I have my BOM done in Vault. Now, on the left side in Inventor, we're kind of even just getting started. I started out looking at the BOM and how am I going to do this? Is it a part? I need to make an empty part. I think I'll go with the virtual component route. So now I add the virtual component. Now I've got to come in here and I've got to give it its part number and description. I don't know what those are off the top of my head, right? So now I call up another system like Fusion Manage, put in the Loctite, search. I see essentially the same results, but now I'm copying and pasting part numbers and descriptions onto the virtual component. And eventually I get all of that in, then I can save my assembly, and then I can export the bill of materials. And now after, more than a minute later, eventually I might have my BOM both complete and available outside of CAD. That's the other thing, right? With Vault Item Master, the BOM is available without any access to the CAD data. To get to that same spot in Inventor, I had to dig up part numbers, copy and paste, export the BOM, and now it's available outside of CAD, right? It's almost a minute and a half later, right? And we're just now getting there, right? So if you need to use that workflow, if you're commonly adding little bits and pieces that you didn't draw, you need to get it on the BOM so it can get purchased or whatever, Vault can be a huge time saver, right? And then finally, some of those additional benefits beyond just, say, day-to-day CAD use, the ability to more easily integrate with ERP or PLM, right? Engineering, people that use CAD, it's very file-centric. I'm working on my CAD files. Where's my assembly file? Where's my drawing, right? File, file, file. Most of the rest of the business, unless you've got a drawing in hand because you're making something or reviewing, you're talking about part numbers. A part number is going to go on a writer in the shop. It's going to go into the business system. It's going to go onto a customer order. A customer order comes in for a part number. It's part number, part number, part number. If your engineering management system has part number information inherently exposed outside of the CAD data, it is going to be easier for other systems to talk to it, right? You can also get your BOM sorted. If the goal is to send our BOM to some other business system, you can get the BOM sorted outside of CAD. You can do all of that in the Vault interface without having to crack open Inventor and open a 1,000-part assembly. It's just right there inside your Vault, right? And it makes it possible to push some updates back to CAD. So you can't update a CAD file BOM necessarily from a change to the BOM in Vault, but you can update property information. So if there's information owned by ERP, let's say, that you really need on the CAD file, ERP can send the data to the Vault item, and the next time the file gets opened, the item can push that property data down to, say, an Inventor I property, which can then land on a drawing, right? So again, data owned by some other place, it gets put in one time, it's correct, gets pushed all the way down to CAD eventually. And then if you've looked into PLM at all, Autodesk's solution for PLM, Fusion Manage, you can actually get that together with Vault. It's a product called Vault PLM. And any future integration between the two provided by Autodesk will almost certainly use Vault Items as essentially the common language between the two. So if you're using Vault Items, it will be likely much less expensive and complex for you to benefit from PLM capability using Vault PLM if you are using items in Vault.